Well, good evening and welcome to Merit TV Canada's post-election coverage. We are this week going to continue to try to bring you a debrief as we are in the aftermath of a Canadian election, which was very interesting to say the least, which just wrapped up yesterday with the Liberals forming a minority government, and the Conservatives, although they did move ahead and gain approximately 20 to 25 new seats, Pierre Poilievre, their leader, did lose his seat. But we're going to be bringing to you some great information over the next week with some great guests to debrief and to look through and to analyze what this election means. Where can we go? What are we going to look like as Canadians? How do we heal as a nation? I think there's going to be some very interesting information. But I wanted to open up this week's post-election coverage with a friend that we have actually from down south, Dr. Phil. And I was able to sit down with Dr. Phil to connect about how important the U.S.-Canada relationship is, because this has been top of mind during this whole entire election with President Donald Trump and the tariff talk and him trolling Canada in regards to being the 51st state and the Liberals running on the idea of elbows up and we have to fight the Donald Trump and the Americans tariff for tariff. This has obviously been a massive theme that we've been walking through here as Canadians in terms of maintaining our sovereignty. Let's unify. Let's be united front and move together. And I think Dr. Phil is going to bring some interesting perspectives as I get to ask him what it looks like from the American perspective in terms of this relationship. And also I wanted to pick his brain as to how do we help a nation come together so we're not so divided, so we're not so tribalistic. As we watch in America, there is tribalism when it comes to different political parties and what are they trying to do to help that nation come to the table. And I believe we can learn a lot because as Canadians, we need to come to the table, whether we vote Liberal or whether you vote Conservative or whether you vote NDP or whatever it might be, is that we have to be able to get back to the place as Canadians of respecting each other, walking with dignity, being able to hear other people's responses, even if they disagree with us, but being able to be willing to agree to disagree, but to move on in a way where we can actually heal and bring the best ideas, the best policy forward so that Canada can be strong. This is a very important issue, and it's going to be interesting to see how do the Liberals govern? What policies are they going to bring forth? What change are they going to bring forth? How are they going to handle President Donald Trump when it comes to tariffs and that trade relationship that we have had for such a long time? And what's going to happen with the Conservatives and Pierre Poilievre? As he said, he's going to continue to lead his party. Well, what is next? Alberta sovereignty is another thing that we're going to have to discuss and look at this week, as that is most likely going to continue to gain steam. And as Albertans weigh, do we become an independent state or an independent province and chart their own history? Or can we come back together as Canadians and find common ground to move forward and to progress forward as a nation and as a great nation? And I believe that we can be. But we're going to be back right after the break with Dr. Phil here on Merit TV Canada's post-election watch. So would you stick with us? Well, welcome to Merit TV Canada's post-election coverage. Thank you for joining us today. I'm joined by Dr. Phil, a great friend from the United States, as you know. Thank you so much, Dr. Phil, for taking some time today to connect about Canada-US. How are you doing?
I am well, and you guys have had a very exciting last few days.
That's to say the least. It was a lot of surprises that happened yesterday as we walked through the election, seeing the results still coming through this morning. There is a definite, I think, excitement for parts of Canada, but also there is maybe a larger strain that's happening on other parts of Canada. So we'll see how those results unfold.
Well, I can imagine, and it seems like there's been a real swing. Over 20-point swing in the last several weeks. So I guess a lot of people are kind of surprised at the outcome of the election. But this is going to be interesting times, to say the least.
Well, yeah, you touched on a really interesting point, because in December, when you look at the Liberal government who just formed a minority government, they were absolutely at their lowest with Justin Trudeau, the former prime minister. It looked like they were going to be absolutely devastated if the election was called. But they they really benefited, to be honest, from President Donald Trump, and the tariff talk that's been going on, especially as Justin Trudeau stepped down. Mark Carney, who has been famous on the international scene as former governor of the Bank of England and also former governor of the Bank of Canada, he took over as leader of the Liberal Party. And that really surged the Liberals in that giant swing that you're talking about. And it really was a little unprecedented here. We haven't seen that much of a comeback in that short of time in our Canadian election history.
Well, how do you think that will play out as far as the economy in Canada? Are people optimistic about this, or are they kind of hunkering down for a tough run?
Dr. Phil, there's honestly a real divide that's been growing in Canada. We're seeing this regionally, specifically in the provinces of Alberta and Saskatchewan. You have a lot of people in those areas, Western Canada, that feel alienated from Eastern Canada, basically ruling from Ottawa. You can say that due to the fact of we have seen on almost every economic metric that you can measure Canadian economy over the last 10 years, we have been on the decline. We have had next to no growth over 10 years. It's just around 1% GDP growth over 10 years, not per year, over 10 years. We have dropped on a list of the top 35 OECD countries in terms of growth. We're at the bottom. Our own energy, we don't even have interprovincial trade. We have to send our oil and our gas to the U.S. to have it come back up in Eastern Canada. There's a lot of issues. So there are definitely people who would lean politically left and who are Liberal supporters, and they obviously spoke during the election yesterday that they're okay with more of the same style of governance, but this is really going to fuel the fire in terms of Alberta asking questions and Saskatchewan. Do we separate? Do we get our own independence? There's lots of talks of referendums. So it's not just one way or the other. There's a growing divide that's happening in Canada.
Yeah, I can understand that, and I've been paying a lot of attention to the reactions to President Trump talking about making Canada a state
Yep.
of America, and I'm wondering how this election will impact the sentiments about that sort of rhetoric from the president, and if people think that he's serious.
You know what? The theme was very strong throughout Canada. It was definitely a part of the Liberals' campaign strategy. Mark Carney had a phrase called elbows up, which is a hockey term about we have to have grit, we have to have fight, we have to show our strength to the threat from the south, so to speak. And he's used language of matching the U.S. tariff for tariff and showing that side of things. So it really stoked the fear of Canadian sovereignty, which has it's not new for Canadians. This has definitely happened in past elections whenever there's been issues like in the 1988 election when U.S. and Canada free trade agreement was being negotiated. There was a lot of interesting fear that was rising at the time. So that was definitely a big part to play in Canada. And Canadians, obviously, they've reacted to that in terms of under the ideal of unity. I think it was a major theme that actually ultimately gave the Liberals the win. I think it helped propel them in the polls as well. We saw in the vote turnout yesterday.
Well, I heard him in his when he was declaring victory. One of the big themes was sovereignty, sovereignty, sovereignty.
That's
that
right.
This is Canadian sovereignty, and that there are a lot of places that Canada can get the things that it gets from the United States from other sources, and that Canadians will come together. And it just seemed like that was a rallying cry, and it seemed to be authentic and impassioned and very strong, and people seemed to be reacting to it when he was speaking those words.
It definitely resonates. I would specifically say in Eastern Canada, Atlantic Canada as well. Western Canada, probably not as much, but there is, and again, he's not, these aren't Mark Carney's not a dumb man at all. He's accomplished, and they had a great strategy in terms of how they were running their campaign. And of course, there is beauty in the idea of national unity. What country does not want to be unified? We're stronger together when we can work together and we can set aside our differences and move forward. So there's obviously a lot of beauty in that message. And in my opinion, the thing that I'm afraid of when it comes to Canada is that this message is a distraction from what the actual problem is in Canada. This tariff talk is relatively new, in the sense of we've had a long-standing, call it marriage, with the United States, and maybe we're going through some speed bumps right now within the marriage. But ultimately, we're tied at the hip, and I believe we'll get over it. But the real issues, I hope that Canadians can find the courage to actually look within and analyze what policies have we been implementing that is actually helping our nation decline, about having money and investment leave Canada, not coming into Canada, of us creating issues for ourselves. And my hope is that as Canada, we can actually look within ourselves and find what can we do to actually chart our own course, can obviously maintain our sovereignty and be unified, but not just blame outside forces for problems that I believe we've ultimately started from within.
Well, national unity is a great thing if it's for the right reasons, and you have to distinguish between pride and being united by victimhood. And pride leads to patriotism, and that's great. And Canada is amazing, and Canadians should be proud. And when victimhood unites people, that's not really patriotism. That's kind of being a passenger. And when you're a victim, you're also a passenger, and things happen to you like happens to you. Victimhood is a dangerous temptation, and it seems like Canada needs to define the truth, not Donald Trump. Victims aren't in charge of their lives or their stories or their outcomes, and that's why this election seems so important. And we've had a great relationship between America and Canada, and I've made so many trips to Canada, and I've had affiliates in Canada over the last 25 years, and had such a great and warm relationship with Canadians. And I've produced primetime television shows there for CBS, and there are so many great tradesmen and craftsmen in Canada that have so much to offer to the American market. And I would hate for anything to break down this great relationship that we've had between America and Canada. And as somebody that works with the Canadian people, I just hate to see tension between the two countries exist, because it's been such a great relationship for so long. I just hate to see anything come between the two countries.
Yeah, I'm on the same page with you, and I think I'm optimistic that this will work itself through. And I personally am hoping the Liberals will change their strategy in terms of how they're going to handle Trump. I just think the place that we are in economically it's not a smart decision to go punch for punch with an economic superpower, the world's largest economy like the U.S. But I do have optimism that Canadians can and continue. And to be honest, I feel that this is where Merit TV Canada can play such an important role with helping get out this message, and why I think it's been great what you guys have been doing of trying to get people to the table to have conversations and to not have this tribalistic sense of we think different, so we can't coexist and we can't put aside our differences. But Dr. Phil, I am curious about, I have a question for you if you don't mind. Is last night, as we were going through election coverage all evening, and I was scrolling through X as I was looking at what the world was coming up with when it comes to Canadians' election results. And they were stating things like, and I saw this in the US quite a bit, that there's a stunning win for Liberals or stunning win for Canadian and Canadian left politically, victory against Trump, those type of things. In your estimation, why does the US media seem very excited or giddy in that sense from this election victory for the Liberals?
Well, I think there is this legacy media in the United States that has created a mindset here against Donald Trump, who is challenging so much of what has been tradition, so much of what has been the way of doing things. And we've seen that in the pushback against the Department of Government Efficiency and coming in and eliminating bloat, eliminating government waste and abuse and fraud. We hear people talk generation after generation saying we need to cut that out of government, but then when somebody does it with intention, everybody gets nervous. And I think Trump has had a real battle going on with legacy media for a long time, and I think there's been an agenda set that has it's been referred to, as you know, in the media as Trump delusional syndrome. And I think people have really kind of set in their mind that anything that he's pushing, there must be something wrong with it, and not really given a chance. He's just coming up on the first 100 days right now.
Yeah.
And last night we had a town hall meeting here on at Merit TV with Robert F. Kennedy Jr. Talking with his agenda, Make America Healthy Again. And the legacy media won't platform that agenda, but we platform that agenda and say, look, make up your own mind. We're going to look at gold level science and find out what's good and what's not. Canada has such great science in what you guys include in your food, what you're feeding the children in the school lunch programs and stuff, which is so much superior to the United States. Canada is superior, Europe is superior, and we're just playing catch up, but yet the legacy media pushes back against that here. And I think there's just this tendency to hold the status quo and resist change. But I see the pendulum swinging.
Yeah.
And I think they've pushed too hard and too far, and I see the pendulum swinging back. And he's doing a lot of it through executive order, and that makes people nervous. But our approach is say, look, give it a chance. We're just at 100 days. So whether 1,300 left, let's give it a chance and see how it plays out. So we're hoping that this pendulum will continue to swing. I don't want it to swing too far to the right. I want it to settle in the middle and let people make up their own mind. We have lost the art of critical thinking in the United States. People need to think critically and evaluate things based on results. And I see that coming back, and I really hope that'll happen. And I hope we can focus on 5 things in light of this snap election, and that's focus on solving problems rather than winning arguments. I think if that can be embraced, I think it would be great. I think if we can work hard to understand the way others see things, that just dovetails so well. And I think we have to guard against rewarding bad behavior. We have to really say, is this in the best interest of the country? I think that's true in America. I think it's true in Canada. And I think we've got to wake up the masses here. We try in America at Merit TV to really appeal to what we call, this middle part of the country, and we have to not stay silent just so others can remain comfortable. And we have to really regain this commitment to treat ourselves and others with dignity and respect. And that means to stop the divisiveness and start listening. We have to treat ourselves and others with dignity and respect. And I think if we do that, I don't think we're nearly as divisive as the legacy media would lead everyone to believe.
Well, that is a message that definitely would resonate here in Canada. And thank you, honestly, for those wise words, because that's part of our goal and what you guys are doing in the U.S. and what we're trying to do here in Canada at Merit TV Canada is help be able to respect each other, even though we might have differences of opinions, have conversations. If we have to agree to disagree, well, we can still respect each other and walk forward. And that's the way that Canada, for us, we can be strong, is when we can create. And unfortunately, I think media and social media has a way of stoking the fire of thinking that we're further apart than we actually are. But I think that's such a value to us, to Merit TV. And I just want to say thank you as well for partnering with us and working with us as we continue to do the work up here in Canada. But Dr. Phil, again, thank you so much for your time. It's been such a pleasure to connect with you on this, and I'm sure we'll connect again.
Appreciate it, David. So long.
Welcome back to Merit TV Canada's post-election watch. My name is David Craig. If you were just joined with us and you were just with us, you heard Dr. Phil actually give some, I think, pretty wise words that Canadians, that we could and we should be taking to heart. And a couple of the main points that stood out to me, one of them specifically was work hard to understand the way that others see things, the way that we can truly understand each other as Canadians, the way that we can narrow a divide, a political divide, a proverbial divide, is by trying hard to listen and to understand why do other Canadians think the way they think. One of the things that we learned over this election campaign, as we had one of our trucks going across Canada, and as we had our camera crews interviewing and connecting with Canadian citizens all across Canada, asking them their opinions, that was so grounding for me, because when you get a chance to actually sit down with other human beings, other Canadians, hear what's on their heart, hear what they're concerned about, you realize real quickly we all want the same thing. We want Canada to be strong. We want Canada to be successful. We want a place we can raise our kids and our kids can thrive. We sometimes have differences in terms of how we get there, but if we all put the effort forward to connect with each other, to try to listen and to try to understand, that's going to be a step forward in terms of us as Canadians being able to walk together in unity to create a strong Canada that we all can be very proud of. Well, stick with us all this week. My name's David Craig, and this is Merit TV Canada's Election Watch.